Well, coming up on today's show, looks like Nissan Leaf's Rapidgate will get a fix for everyone. Tesla deny that they are chasing a Chinese battery deal, and Peugeot have a full electric car coming. Those stories and a lot more on today's very busy EV News Daily. Good morning, good afternoon and good evening wherever you are in the world. Welcome to the show, Thursday 24th of January. Today it's Martyn Lee here, and I've been through every EV story that I can find and picked out the ones I think you need to know about. As always, thank you to myev.com. They do help make this show, and they have built the world's first marketplace all about buying and selling electric vehicles. So if you would like to get into the market for an EV sometime this year, or maybe it's time for you to move on and up and onto a different model, and you're going to sell one to somebody who you know is a fellow EV enthusiast because they've discovered a site like myev.com. We all want our precious cars to go to a good new owner, don't we? Then you can check them out. Starting with Nissan, and first up, a public service announcement, if you like. Following all of Nissan's troubles over the last year, we first heard about a software fix for the so-called Rapidgate issue from Bjorn Nyland. Well, I first heard of it. I think there's other YouTubers who maybe reported on it first, but Bjorn did some pretty in-depth testing on rapidly charging after long journeys when the battery was hot, and the newer Leaf 40 kilowatt hour that he tested, it took the higher charge speed whilst the battery was still pretty hot. And then I think the key to it is, not being a Leaf owner myself, I think the key is that when the battery's hot, if you were to then stop the charge halfway through and start it again for whatever reason, that's when, you know, you'll leave off at, say, charging at 35 kilowatts, and then you plug it back in a second later, the BMS goes, oh, battery's a bit hot, I'll charge at 20, or something like that. So if you leave it plugged in, I gather that's not so much of a problem anyway. It looks like this problem's been fixed with the software update. Now, on Bjorn's video, he did tell an anecdotal story of a contact of his who owns one, getting onto their local Nissan dealer. Not sure where that was, in Europe, the UK maybe, and the dealer saying, we're not doing it, you're not entitled to it. Now, that might have been some miscommunication, some misinformation. And at the time, now it looks like Nissan have made an official statement on this, and this is good news. And if you do go along to your local dealer and they try not to install the patch, maybe even just bring this article up on your phone, this is, I mean, by the way, if I were Nissan, I would be on such a PR offensive at the moment. I'd be super serving my customers. I would be going all out to prove that I still care about EVs. Last time I went onto the Nissan website, they were still listing completely the wrong price for the plug-in car grant here in the UK. It got lowered such a long time ago, and they still have the higher price on there in their disclaimer, their official legal terms and conditions on the Nissan website. And I tweeted them. I said, guys, it's been months. No response. I don't want a response because I'm an EV podcast and in any way. Actually, I'm a lot less important than someone who's parted with their own hard-earned money. But I see people tweet Nissan occasionally and saying, like, hey, your website's out of date. I never see a reply. So if I were them, I would be so super serving. I'd be on a PR offensive. I'd be contacting every eligible owner saying, hey, we've got an update for your BMS. You'll charge better, charge quicker. Maybe that's happening. If you're a Nissan Leaf owner, let me know. We have more details on the story from Electrive.com. Nissan's now offering a software update for the Leaf models that are affected with the 40 kilowatt hour battery. And it corrects the significant reduction in DC charging speed that occurs under the so-called Rapidgate. This is an article that I found today. A Nissan spokesman, according to Electrive, a Nissan spokesman said directly to Electrive that they would be offering the fix on all Leaf models that have a production date between the 8th of December 2017 and the 9th of May 2018. They say that the cars they made from the 10th of May onwards had the current software version. I was never able to test it, by the way, so I never commented on it at the time, despite a fair few complaints and people emailing me or messaging me saying that I was ignoring it in a way I didn't care about Leaf owners, that I was in Nissan's pocket was one of the suggestions. I'd prefer to call it not defaming a company for something I had no proof over personally. But hey, you feel free to get yourself sued. For those that had experienced Rapidgate, they were entitled to go on YouTube and make claims and comments about the company and call it fair comment because they'd experienced it. I hadn't, so I never re-reported those early claims. I got a lot of stick for doing that because what if those people on YouTube were lying? I didn't think they were because some of them were people that I've since met, really sound people with reputations to hold up, but, you know, I didn't fancy losing my shirt and being sued. So I never reported on this for a long, long time until it was really recognised by Nissan, and even then they never said it was a problem. There was a general reluctance from Nissan to hold their hands up and say that they'd botched the Leaf 40, but instead they recognised the issue as an expected behaviour in order to protect the battery. However, Electrive say they tested it themselves. Our editors put it to the test and they confirmed the problem. According to Nissan, the Leaf has safety precautions to protect the battery during repeated rapid charge processes. These are important for the service life of the battery, not least because of any lack of thermal management in terms of liquid-cooled thermal management, the gold standard of keeping a battery cool. And of course, the Nissan warranty is unaffected if you are one of those who have the car. The thing I don't quite understand to my simple brain is if previously you had to slow it down to protect the pack, and now they're letting you charge faster because they were getting so much kickback on Twitter. There's no hardware changes they've made. Did they get it wrong the first time, or now is this going to shorten the life of your battery? Or another option? I don't know. Let me know your thoughts. Is it good enough what they're doing, Leaf drivers? Those that have parted with their hard-earned money are in much more of a position to comment than I am. What else could Nissan have done, realistically? They can't change the hardware in the cars. Should the Leaf really just be thought of as a town car, but pop into the shop and doing some short journeys with the very occasional long drive if you know you're going to be stopped for a long time? If the problem rears itself on the 62 kilowatt hour car, because they're promising 70 kilowatt charge speeds on that, which is fast, right? If the problem rears itself again, should you just buy the 40 kilowatt hour Leaf and think of it as a runaround? Why buy the bigger one with a very heavy battery? What's effectively for a town car? Or is the new one worth a punt? Because it's expensive as well. Let me know your thoughts. You can email the show anytime. hello@evnewsdaily.com. I'd love to get your thoughts, not being a Leaf owner myself. Moving on to Toyota, and I reported on this twice recently, maybe last week it was, the last few days at least. Toyota and Panasonic confirmed today they will indeed launch the joint venture that was rumoured, leveraging the heft of one of the world's biggest automakers, and a very profitable one at that, and the battery makers Panasonic for their EV push. They confirmed it to Reuters today. Toyota confirmed to have 51% of the new company. Panasonic will have the rest, and they said in a joint statement confirming previous reports. We don't talk about Peugeot too much on the podcast, or as I heard it called yesterday at the car event I was at, Peugeot. I have heard them called that before, but this was a car person calling it Peugeot, and I'm like, well, should I be calling it Peugeot? Anyway, the French manufacturer Peugeot, part of PSA, they're going to follow up the imminent launch of the 208 Super Mini car with a new 2008 crossover in the autumn, says Autocar. The most significant change is going to be the new platform for the 2008, as it's going to be a fully electric car for the very first time. Now, we don't get the full EV this year, we get it next year in 2020. First, the conventional piston cars are going to be launched. The old tech first, then the tech that you really want next year. The electric version follows on from the platform-sharing 208, going to adapt the car's electric motor and a new lithium-ion battery pack as well. Details of the range and performance not yet announced. I'll put a link to the full article in the show notes. Staying with Peugeot, and Peugeot's told its UK dealer network to get ready, prepare yourselves for the forthcoming EV revolution. During its national dealer conference at the NEC in Birmingham, this year, the carmaker spelled out how it sees its growth in the future, the EV adoption that's going to change the face of the dealership model that's required by Peugeot customers, according to a report today by Paul Miles for TU Automotive. Well, David Peel is the managing director of Peugeot here in the UK. David Peel told dealers to be prepared for the energy transition, especially now the brand is committing to electrifying its entire product range within 5 years. But are the dealers ready? And do the dealers want to sell EVs, bearing in mind the two big things they make money out of? Finance, well, that'll continue, and servicing, that ain't going to continue, because EVs just don't need it. Let's get on to Tesla then. A big story breaking as I walked out into the studio at the bottom of the garden today. Tesla, in a Bloomberg report by Dana Hull, Tesla confirming to them in a written statement as a reply to a press inquiry that they are reducing the hours that the S and the X are being made for. Now, I've glanced at this article as I was walking down the garden path on my phone, so I'm going to get my thoughts together and bring it for you tomorrow properly when I've had a chance to think about what does it really mean. Well, it makes sense, my first initial impression, because they're getting rid of the 75 kilowatt hour battery pack. So you had two options on the S or the X, and they're getting rid of one of them. And I don't think everybody who is buying a 75 kilowatt hour pack immediately goes to 100 and adds, off the top of my head, $14,000, $15,000. So I don't think that happens. So it makes sense. The article looked like it was, flash, breaking news. We're shocked. The world is shocked that Tesla have reduced the hours of the S and the X in the factory. It doesn't seem very shocking to me. It seems kind of obvious, but hey, I'm not a Bloomberg journalist. It seems like, yeah, that's a non-story. They just got rid of one of them. Of course, they're going to make less of them. They're probably going to be doing some retooling, maybe for a refresh, maybe the new 2170 cells or something else. But the fact they're making fewer of them, now they're making only half of the ones they were making. Is that just me? Is this like, it just seems common sense? It's like 2 and 2 is 4. But anyway, the article seemed utterly shocked, like, oh my God! I'll read it properly and bring you the story tomorrow. Hey, let's talk about Honda. And a quickly mention for Tesla, by the way, Tesla have been in the news today because they were rumoured to have done this big battery deal with a Chinese manufacturer that, behind the back of Panasonic or something. Today, Tesla actually put a quote out about this story with Tianjin Lishan for a battery supply contract. They said they've not signed any agreement with the Chinese firm, according to Business Report. It was Reuters that said today, citing two sources, that Tesla had done a deal, that Tesla and Lishan had signed a preliminary agreement and were working on the details. Tesla deny that. I'll put a link to the article in the show notes for you. Hey, Honda have got this gorgeous EV coming, and they say it's coming this year. It's called the Urban EV, and it even won the readers' vote at the event I was at last night, which was the What Car of the Year Awards. They put 16 cars to the readers of the magazine What Car, and the readers, in their thousands, voted this easily, they said, easily the winner, the Honda Urban EV. This is a prototype at best. It's a concept that's been released at a motor show. Now, it's been seen in some Motor1.com pictures, some spy pics, but apart from that, that's all we've seen of it, and the readers still voted it their favourite. Well, today, Honda confirmed the rumours about the world premiere of the prototype in the upcoming Geneva Motor Show. So still, not the production of it, just the prototype at Geneva. The Japanese manufacturer also put out a new sketch of the prototype with some new thoughts on how it might look. I like the older one. I didn't like this new sketch they put out. It was from one angle, and it wasn't a very flattering, like dead straight on looking up the bonnet. You'd need to see more pictures to really make a judgment call. It's going to go on sale later this year, they say. I'll put a link to the Inside EVs article in the show notes for you. All right, let's talk VW. This is a strange story next. Let me give you the basics. We'll work out together what it could possibly mean, because you've always got to try and decipher these things. The move to EVs will make cars a lot more expensive, meaning they become unaffordable for people on low incomes, claims Volkswagen. The chairman of Volkswagen said in an interview published over the weekend, according to Reuters, Hans-Dieter Poch told Welt am Sonntag newspaper, I quote, "We have the clear goal of making electromobility accessible to a broad section of the population. That is, to make it affordable. The current price level cannot stay the same if these cars are equipped with electric motors. Therefore, it will inevitably lead to a significant price increase in the small car segment." End quote. So that's the first bit of the story. Then today, the Volkswagen Group CEO, Herbert Diess, warned the European Union's proposed emissions targets for 2030, in 11 years' time, that they're too demanding and that the resulting push to electric cars would mean motoring becomes too expensive for the less well-off. It was picked up by Automotive News Europe website. Diess said that VW Group will be able to comply. They will be able to comply with the new EU emissions rules of 60 grams of CO2 per kilometre by 2030 by boosting sales of EVs to between 45 and 50% of their total volume by 2030. But then he warned, and I quote, "I'm not sure how many customers could afford it." End quote. As an example, he said that the retail price of the really small mini car, it's called the VW Up, if you're familiar with it, it's tiny, it could raise the price by €3,500 to a total of €14,500 to be compliant with the emissions targets. The price for the Polo could rise by €4,000, he said. And that's where I'm really confused, trying to put the pieces of the jigsaw together and not managing it yet. So maybe with your help I can do that. So this is how I see it then. Europe has these really stringent emissions rules coming in 11 years' time, 2030. It's all about CO2, and it's based on the total fleet of cars that you sell as an automaker, and they're measuring CO2. So VW say that they are going to be the leading electric car maker and making enough EVs. That quote said they'll be making enough EVs, about half of what they sell, that means they won't be affected by the emissions reduction. So many EVs in their fleet, it will offset it. They're going to do it, no problem. They're going to hit the target. But in the very next sentence, they say that in order to comply with the emissions targets, they're going to have to make their piston cars more expensive. That doesn't make any sense. If you're selling enough EVs to hit the target, well, then you're hitting your target, because half the cars that you're selling are electric with zero emissions. So the other half have emissions, but they're balanced out. And that's the bit where I'm really struggling with this story. So, yeah, if the battery prices continue to come down, I don't see in 11 years' time how that's going to be an issue. You know, maybe even if you say it's $100 per kilowatt hour, a 40 kilowatt hour pack, which would still be a pretty big pack, by the way, for a really small mini car, but, you know, advances in technology, well, you know, that'd be $4,000 for the battery. So could you make the rest of the car for less than $10,000? Well, yes, if you're VW, obviously. So why would the price be $14,500? Anyway, that's the story as it is. But look, by 2030, and remember, 100-year-old technology is what these car companies are used to talking about. They're used to incremental gains. I mean, they're smart people, but battery technology is moving on so quickly. In the last 10 years alone, the cost of a battery has gone from roughly $1,000 per kilowatt hour to $150 per kilowatt hour at pack level. Imagine what the tech will be like in another 11 years. It won't be lithium-ion. It might be another technology not even yet invented. Remember that also, CEOs, people who operate in that stratosphere of management, CEOs don't say these kind of things for giggles. They don't say them just for a laugh. They have a game plan. And 9 times out of 10, everything they say in public is politically driven to influence someone somewhere for their company's gain. As for the comment that emissions regulations will mean small cars get more expensive to meet the demands, I just don't see how that would happen. Sell enough EVs and your small city cars running on petrol, not diesel, will be fine. Diesel has a CO2 advantage, but I still think it'd be fine. Final thought, by the way. 11 years ago, you hadn't heard of a company called Tesla. Maybe a few people had, but you and I hadn't really heard of Tesla properly. The automotive industry relies on stability, supply chains, long-term planning, building factories. For the auto industry to operate at the speed of Tesla, very, very high risk. Potentially high reward, but very high risk. Loss-making company, in the news every day, a wild CEO who's on Twitter all the time. This is not the way they behave. They don't like to be rushed in these kind of things. The investments they've made don't suit it. It's natural for them to talk about 2030 in terms of certainty. The one thing I can be certain about is no one knows what the world will be like in 2030. So they talk about their 5 and 10 and 15-year plans because that's what they've always done. They love this stability. The world is going to be radically different in 11 years' time. So we'll see where it ends up and which EV makers win and which incumbents are consigned to the history books. Hey, final story, by the way. The former Nissan fleet national EV manager, a guy called Carl Anders, has been appointed as the managing director of Energy E-Mobility here in the UK, according to Fleet News. Now, Energy E-Mobility acts as a technology and service provider with an e-mobility hardware and software portfolio. The company is a supplier to several major automobile manufacturers and has started the rollout already for the Audi UK dealer network. And there you go. There's a story that I want to end on because it's a story that wouldn't have existed even a few years ago, with words like e-mobility and e-mobility hardware and software portfolios, these kind of things that we talk about with the forthcoming EV revolution. I want to give you that story as an example of how the world changes so quickly. Hey, thanks a lot to myev.com for setting question of the week this week. Have you sent me your answer yet? Because I'd love to read it. Here's the question. What's the best way, if you're a non-EV driver, what's the best way for you to get your first taste of electric motoring? Is it a test drive, maybe to hire one? An experience centre, possibly, where there's no sales pitch, but you get to try different EVs. And if you are already an EV driver, cast your mind back before you ever got inside one. What's the way that you would like to have got a taste of EVs? If you could have, wave a magic wand and change things. Well, thank you very much to 178 patrons of the podcast. If you are unfamiliar with Patreon, it's how we fund this show. I would much rather have 178 different bosses than just one, and that's why I love this model where the listeners of the show fund the show, and therefore it's impartial, and you know that I'm answering to nobody. Thank you very much to those at Patreon. patreon.com/EV News Daily means I haven't got to say certain things to keep certain people happy, you see. As always, thank you very much to everyone who's downloaded previous episodes, 366 previous shows online for free, where you get your podcasts from. You can hit subscribe, even on the YouTube audio that we put up. You get it first and free and automatically. Come and say hi on the socials by searching EV News Daily. Have a wonderful day. I'll catch you tomorrow.